You don't hear a clicking, do you?
No.
Okay. Because that was because my fan, like, I don't know what's going on with my fan on my computer, but it like it's
Right.
clicking.
No. No.
So
No clicking.
that's
Uh,
also why I set this mic up, because I was
yeah.
worried because like this one will pick up like any little sound, and I'm like,
Yeah.
because I
How's
noticed last
yeah.
the last editing of the last episode, I was like, oh god, the clicking's in there.
What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in again to Real Talk by Our Stories, Your Legacy. We're back again with another fire round episode. Just whatever's happening around in our personal lives, or the lives of the holistic world in general. That kind of gets us together to speak on a weekly topic, right? So daylight savings just came and went last weekend. Fall back, quote unquote, fall back, as the saying goes. So at this time, we go back an hour, meaning we get an extra hour back in our lives, here in the U.S. Anyways, the downside though is that during this time the sun sets a lot sooner, giving us less daylight hours during the day. So I recently read a short article about people. I mean, don't quote me on this. I have to go back to the article, but I believe people in Finland or Norway, where during the wintertime, they hardly get any sun, if any light at all. But contrary to the belief that only sunny days make people happier, vitamin D, whatever, the people there are happiest during these nights, during these times, or night or dark times. And the reason is because they choose to, or maybe adapt. Who knows? We don't live there, but like they chose to focus on things in the moment, or they choose to find something to be happy about. For instance, it's winter time, so that means more time to play in the snow, more time to cozy up by the fire with a good drink, or more time to spend intimately with loved ones, right? And so it's just like they, instead of them worrying about I have no light, or this or that, it's more of like, all right, how do we shift our attention to something more positive? All in all, it's an interesting take in general, especially here in the US, where, we generally complain about almost everything, but we complain sometimes of how little sun we get during the winter time. But, at least we get some sun, right? In this episode, we're not going to go into the history of daylight savings, or we're not going to get into the psychology of the folks who don't get any sun during the wintertime. Instead, we're going to have a kind of fun little conversation about ourselves and if daylight savings even impact us in any way, or do we notice any changes in ourselves during that first couple of weeks, or months, or do we notice any changes generally in others? So as always, before we begin, we're going to do a quick vibe check around the room, quick little intro, see who is with us at this virtual table today. Of course, you got myself, and then Tyler. How's it going with you today, man?
It's going well. It's going well. We're recording this the day after daylight savings. For us, we're at a time where we're falling back. So, we gained an hour of sleep and all of that. So, it's one of those things, like when we fall back, we get that extra hours of sleep. It's kind of a benefit in a way. So feeling good. I don't know what it was, because like you fall back, so you gain an hour that day, but then your body clock is obviously still an hour ahead, so then you get tired earlier. But that also means you have to wake up, um, same ish distance time span the next morning on Monday.
Yeah.
So it's like you get that extra hour of sleep on Sunday, but then it's kind of like you're still adjusting to whatever it is for the next day or something,
Right.
So it's like, oh yeah, you can play with your mind a little bit, and you're just like, oh, me waking up at 6 a.m. really makes me wake up at 7 a.m. I'm
Right.
like, but if you went to bed at the same time at, like, say 11 p.m., you're going to bed at midnight, so you're still getting the
Yeah.
same amount of sleep the next day. But
Right.
yeah, I don't know, for whatever reason this morning I woke up before my alarm went off this morning, so I don't know if that I don't think that had anything to do with it, but I don't know. I just felt more awake today. And I think that
Mm,
may have been the extra hour of sleep that I picked up Sunday. So I don't know if that accounts for it, but definitely felt more rejuvenated today for whatever reason,
right.
for a Monday, which is a little odd, a little different, I guess, especially going back into the office. Um, yeah, I think I felt this is probably the best Monday in the last, I don't know, 7 weeks or so, 7, 8
Right.
weeks, just because, well, we've also been really busy. So, you know,
Nice, man.
yesterday was no exception. It was still busy,
Right.
but I felt way more energized today. Um, I mean, it's still dark when I leave for work, so it doesn't really
Right.
matter. Uh,
Right.
I know it's supposed to help with that, but I'm like, it was still dark outside, so I didn't really notice too much of a difference in the
Right.
morning, at least.
Nice. Yeah, man. It didn't really affect me too much. I was off work today, so I was able to sleep in anyways, like more than usual. So that kind of rejuvenated me because I was really tired yesterday from the daylight savings, and so you know. But in terms of puppy time, that doesn't change anything. If anything, it was funny for our puppy. We um, she lost an extra hour of eating because we woke up later than usual to feed her, so she felt it probably a little more. Cool, man. Let's jump right into it. All right, Tyler, so daylight saving times yesterday, so it's still fresh in our mind. So generally, you know it's something to think about. How does daylight savings impact you, generally, or even if it doesn't, how do you feel like it does impact other people around you?
Um, I would say that for me, I think it really just depends on when we're talking about daylight savings. I think if you're talking about falling back, everyone loves that time because then you fall back and you gain an hour of sleep that first night. So then you feel more rejuvenated, or at least you tell yourself you feel more rejuvenated, right? So, but the con on that one is that, the light comes out earlier, but then it gets darker, earlier as well, just because you lose that time. So now it gets dark around, 5 o'clock. It's going to be 4 o'clock soon. And, that's just the time of the year it's going to be. So I think for that, it doesn't really affect me too much other than the fact that it's dark when I get home. It's definitely one of those, like, a dark and dark person. So you leave and get to work when it's dark, and you get home and it's dark. So, and I think that's most people. Some people might start a little bit later, but get off in the dark anyway. So I think during this time, I think people appreciate the sleep part component of it, but then they'll complain that it's dark earlier, which, during this time of the year, most people don't want to go outside anyways, just because of the weather. It's cold, it's rainy, it's snowy, depending on where you live, of course. But yeah, but if we're talking like, spring forward kind of thing, with daylight savings and going back, or really going forward, really, uh, at that point, yeah, then you lose an hour of sleep on that day. But then it's like, oh, it's you get light longer in the day, which is very beneficial in other ways. So I think for me, like, it doesn't really hit me too much. It's just that slight adjustment for that first day. And then I'm like, all right, my body needs to adjust to it real quick, which, science says that shifting your sleep schedule or whatever it is by an hour, especially if you're on a routine, can obviously be detrimental to your health. So I'm sure it really affects people differently, obviously, um, in all of that. So I think the fall back is helpful for a lot of people, but springing forward, um, definitely gets people sick. You know what I mean? Because they're like, oh God, what do I do? Because you're changing their whole routine up really. So for me, it doesn't really affect me too much, I would say, other than maybe the mood in the evening. Because when I get off work, I'm like, oh man, it's dark. So then I'm a little sad because then I can't do something outside like I normally would prior to that. I'm like, all right, if I get off work at this time, then I'll have approximately 47 minutes to do something in the light, essentially, during this time. But falling back an hour and losing that, you get off at 4 o'clock, and I'm like, all right, well, it's going to be dark here in about 20 minutes. It takes me that long to get home, so I'm probably going to be walking in the dark if I want to do anything. So I would say that's kind of like my con on at least falling back, is that I lose the daylight. So you don't get to enjoy it. Because I'm also one of those people that enjoy going outside in the fall and the winter, regardless of the rain or the snow or whatever. I just like that crisp air. Like it feels good. It feels, I don't know, feels fresh when you're breathing it. So that's something for me, at least. Springing forward, obviously a little bit different. Spring is just the bane of my existence with all the pollen regardless. So having more light, it doesn't really affect me until the summer, but I would say for other people, it just depends on, what you're doing. If you're working your normal 8 to 5, 9 to 5, or if you're on graveyard, obviously that affects you differently. It's a different dark to dark. If you think about it, you start in the evening and then you go till the morning, and then you're sleeping in the sunlight. So, I don't know. There's just so many things that can affect people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. Thanks for that. For me, it's like, I'm thinking of daylight savings time was yesterday on a weekend. So, I don't work weekends, and obviously I'm off today, but, I work from home. So it's one of those things where I don't think it, especially now that I'm working from home, it doesn't feel like it's going to impact me that much. Right. Because regardless, I don't have to figure out a new routine. I don't have to sleep in a little later. Or sorry, what I mean is I don't have to sleep in earlier to wake up at an earlier time or a later time. So it's an interesting phenomenon now that I'm working from home full time, that daylight savings doesn't really have an impact currently. But yeah, I remember when I had to go in and commute and stuff to the office. Daylight saving times mess with you, like even if you gain an hour, right? Because it goes back in time. So you get an extra hour, or they say, it was still, that means you would sleep a little later, or, it wouldn't do anything too beneficial as much, because you would still have to commute. And that commute is a long time. But now that I'm working from home, it's maybe one of those things where it doesn't really, I don't really tell the difference, whether that's a good or a bad thing, because, we're just kind of like locked in our own zone, right? We're not even going to get into like the new meta universe, so like it's like, it's going to be a moot point that, daylight savings go back or go forth, because, we're all going to be like working virtually and stuff. I'm not going to say all of us, or if that's the future. It's just like, I'm just thinking, kind of as an analogy of where I'm at in terms of time is kind of, besides clocking in, clocking out, and then just getting work done within a certain time, working from home, you kind of lose a sense of that, that time of like commuting or whatnot. And yeah, so typically I would see that it impacts people in kind of the same way you mentioned. It's like it either makes you more tired or it makes you less tired. So, but typically most people do enjoy the fallback, time. Getting in a little extra hour does seem to help out a lot. So Tyler, what's your personal feelings about daylight savings in general? This is your op-ed, just kind of like, do you feel like it's even beneficial at all? Like personally, like, or is this something that just kind of passes by like a blip on the calendar, and, you just move on with your life?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't know, man. I feel like once you spring forward, I mean, I think it should just stay that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of just falling back in the fall. Like, yeah, I know people love the fall back in the fall. But I think once you get to that point where like you're just an hour ahead, or what we were in 3 days ago, I think that, if we just stayed on that time, I think we're fine. Because if we're really thinking about it, yeah, sure, it's dark in the morning, but you still preserve some of that light in the evening in the fall, right? And the whole point of like, the benefits or the pros and cons of having daylight saving time, I think when you talk about the pros and cons of it, most of the time it's regarding the spring forward daylight savings. We're not talking about the fallback. I feel like a lot more people are comfortable with the fallback because they, in their minds, they get that hour back technically.
Right.
And then the spring forward, you lose that hour. But, if we were to stay on, the spring forward time, because that's where the pros and cons usually come in. That's where people really talk about the pros and cons. I feel like, at least, because, pros obviously springing forward is that we have longer evenings. It promotes, sometimes it promotes a healthier lifestyle, because there's more light throughout the day, which promotes people wanting to go outside more, because it's like, oh, it's lighter later now, where it's could be 9:30, 10 o'clock some days, on the longest days of the year for the summer and stuff. But like even during the summer, like sometimes it's too hot at 5 or 6 o'clock, because that's usually the peak heat time of the day. So when it's going to be light out at 8 p.m. and you can still go out for a walk, or play some sort of sport or run or whatever it is, it promotes a little bit more activity, a little bit more healthy decisions in that regard. So I think, obviously, if you spring forward and you just keep it there, you run into the same thing in the fall. Sure, it's a little bit darker in the morning, but you still have a little bit more light when you're going home, which is when I feel like people are more irritable, is in the evening in the dark rather than in the morning in the dark. It seems a little backwards, because people need to get their coffee and all that stuff in the morning, and they might be agitated or tired. But I feel like working a full day, you're more tired, coming home. So having more light at that point might be more beneficial. And I think the bigger pro too is just the less artificial light. You know what I mean? So like you have more of the natural light coming in throughout the day. In the fall, it's going to be dark anyways. So you can adjust to that. But falling back, you essentially have to be in light inside for much longer. So for me, I think if we went away with it and we stayed in the spring forward state of things, then I think we're fine. That's kind of my personal opinion on it. I don't see the point of falling back. I know obviously there are reasons, and this has been going on for hundreds of years, over 100, I would say. But no one talks about the fallback portion of daylight saving time. They always talk about the pros and cons of moving forward. But like I said earlier, I think moving forward also messes with your sleep schedule. You know what I'm saying? So like when you fall back and you gain that hour, it doesn't necessarily mess with your schedule. Whereas going forward, like you have to lose an hour because you get used to the falling back time. And like that can promote sickness or whatever, because like you might be used to getting this amount of sleep and then your body's tired all the time. You're adjusting to the like, oh, I went to bed at whatever time last night and I lost an hour, so I only got 6 hours of sleep. So then you're tired, and then you're trying to recover it, and then you're compensating with more caffeine, and just might get depressed and all that stuff. And who knows, lack of sleep could cause, I don't know, car accidents in the morning, or just you're more irritable that kind of thing. So I don't know. I think maybe take a page out of, at least in the States, for the rest of the world who's listening, if there are anybody else in the world listening. The United States is weird. We know. I would say, maybe take a page out of Arizona and Hawaii's book. The only two states that don't run on daylight savings time, they just have their normal time. So, when you talk to people who live in Arizona, they're like, you guys are weird. It's like, oh, what time is it for you now? Oh, it's the same time here. Didn't change.
I was gonna say too, I thought you were gonna go on and like take a page out of the people from Finland or Norway, or again, don't quote me. I gotta go back into the article, but whatever. One of those, it sounds right. Finland and Norway always have a good reputation of being some of the happiest people on earth. But anyways, like you feel like so many. We think of we list so many of the negative things and how we try to overcome it. But, it's one of those things where the same could be true, that we could just kind of ignore it or just continue with our lives, choosing to pick the positives, or like, ignoring that it's going to set us back in our sleep, or it's going to give us a little bit more sleep, and just more of like, hey, it's another day. The time went back, and move forward with it. You think that's something we possibly, as people in the U.S., can do? I don't know. I'm speaking generally, Yeah,
I mean, I think a lot of people can adjust to it and just kind of go with it. I think the adjustment for falling back is a lot easier than springing forward, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like, obviously, like, if you wake up after 7 hours of sleep or something, on falling back, you wake up an hour earlier and you're just like, oh, okay, cool. But losing an hour, like you try to get 7 hours of sleep and maybe you don't set an alarm in the spring. Now you're an hour late. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like, obviously that one's a little bit harder to deal with, which is why, like, maybe if, you get to the point where you're springing forward, so you have more light in the evenings, then keep it that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's if we're talking about like whether we need daylight savings time, I feel like having it lighter in the evening longer makes more sense to me. Because, granted, I know people, I mean, I'm one of them. I used to run, well, I still do run in the morning when it's still dark, but I have my ways to stay safe with vests and lights and all those things. But I mean, most people, I feel like, aren't necessarily the most active in the morning. They're still groggy. So if it's dark, I guess they stay groggy. But, those people are also the people that are drinking coffee before they leave home for work and stuff. So I don't know. There's, obviously pros and cons, and I think there's ways to adjust to it. But who knows where we go as far as like, I know that's been a topic of discussion. Getting rid of it for, I mean, I don't know how many years that conversation comes up. I feel like that's every spring when it comes up. It's like, oh my God, we have to abolish the daylight savings time because we lose an hour and we feel horrible. And like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, thanks for that. I think we're going to wrap it up, put our final thoughts, and, let's end it on a positive note, because I just kind of had this thought. Positive about fallback, and maybe we'll talk about spring forward daylight savings, later in the next year when it happens. But for fallback, like I said, I got a lot of things done today. Even with me sleeping in for a while, but I got up, got a lot of chores done, cleaned up around the house, and then I would look at the clock and I realized, like, for example, typically if because of how dark it gets so early, like I think the sun set like 4:30 today or something, or maybe earlier.
Something like that.
Yeah, it was like super dark, like around 4:30. And I'm just getting things done. I'm about to start dinner. And usually when I'm starting dinner, it's like 6:00, right? And I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, wow, it's 4:30 or it's 4:00. So, a positive is, if you don't really think about it, yes, you don't have light in the day in the physical world, but you do have a lot more time in the day to fill it with doing other things, that could, benefit you. So take advantage of that. Any positive final word for you about daylight savings, especially fallback or just daylight savings in general?
Yeah. I mean, once we get to the point where we adjust to the time, though, then we're back into our normal routine.
Right.
At least that first few days, you feel kind of energized, just because of that. I think that's the thing. I obviously, I've been so go and so busy that picking up that extra hour of sleep on Sunday morning, I was like, hey, I feel great. I didn't feel tired. I didn't have a headache or anything like that. I just went about my day, went to bed and woke up this morning before my alarm was even like set. You know what I mean? Like, you just feel rejuvenated for at least the first few days.
Right.
I think working from home is a little bit different, obviously. If you would have asked me this last year, I would have been like, nah, I don't have an opinion on it really because I'm working from home.
Right.
So I really don't care,
Yeah. Yeah.
But obviously if you have a day off, it changes, your the scheme of how things work too. If you're going to the office, it obviously changes your answer too. Like last year working from home, my answer probably would have been different from my answer today, just because of, I had to go in the office, but I felt like energized going into the office today. I felt like I was able to just power through a lot more things and not hit that 3:00 lull like I normally do, or 2:00, whatever time you hit the lull.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. Awesome, man. Thank you for that. So we're going to wrap it up here. Thank y'all for listening. As always, ask yourself this question: How does daylight savings impact you? We all, well, especially here in the U.S., can't speak for the rest of the world, but how does it impact you? How does it impact your friends and family or your loved ones? Is it negative? So how can you put a positive spin on it? And if it's already positive, how can drop some comments and share how you kind of get through the lull of daylight savings if for others who do experience that type of lull, right? So thank you for listening. As always, we like to drop the knowledge that speaking, continue to keep the dialogue going is what keeps us going and keeps us growing, right, as human beings. And so we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep coming at you with different topics every week on the dot. And so have a good night. We'll see y'all next week.
Yeah, we'll see you next week. And remember, Movember, men out there who listen to this podcast, get checked. Men's health is important. So we'll see you next week.
Peace.